Whistle while you work.
From Disney on March 21st, the magical tale
Snow White.
Snow White?
Snow White.
that started it all
I believe you're looking for me.
arrives in theaters.
Magic mirror on the wall.
Experience the Disney classic
Who's the fairest one of all?
like never before.
We haven't even been in reverse yet.
Disney Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses.
I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
I think you're on mute.
Workday is starting to sound the same.
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 699 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are here to recap the big victory over the Wake Forest Deacons. Duke moves to 17-0 at home, and will stay that way. For the second time in 3 years, they are undefeated at home. I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. Normally, I have Jason Evans with me, but Jason Evans is very busy with life and work right now, so he could not make it to this recap. I promise you he will be back when the dog is here for episode number 700. In his place, National Podcast Six Man of the Year candidate, I think is a lock for ACC Podcast Six Man of the Year, Scott Rich. Scott, how you doing, man?
I didn't know I was even nominated. This is such an honor.
We nominated you months ago. They just now got back to us on the application, so you're in there. We'll just see if the voters will vote for you. I think you have our vote.
Oh well, thank you, sir. That means
bias on this show. So. Scott, we have you here. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Wake Forest game. But first off, a couple superlatives of last night's victory. 93-60 was the final score. 18 wins this year in the ACC. That is the most in 1 year during the regular season. As I mentioned, 17-0 at home. It's the second time under John Shire that Duke has gone undefeated at home. It was also senior night, given it was the last day game of the season in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Mason Gillis, Sion James, Neil Begovic, and Stanley Borden were honored before the game. Spencer Hubbard was not honored this year because he was honored last year as a senior, and at that point was unclear whether or not he was going to come back, and decided to come back.
Can I just say, very sarcastically, shame on John Shire for not giving Spencer Hubbard a double senior night.
Leaky Black at 7.
Double senior nights are the norm, not the exception. RJ Davis is going to have his second senior night. Armando Baycott had his second senior night. Mason Gillis had senior night at Purdue and then got another one
Sion James
with us last
well.
night. Same with Sion James. How dare John Shire not give Spencer Hubbard his double senior night? End of sarcastic rant.
Hopefully Spencer Hubbard gets his second senior night when we're raising a banner at the end of the season. That's my hope, that we're saving the best for last. I should also note that last night there were several senior managers that were honored before the game. We talk about them, but we don't have their names normally. Tonight we do. Luke Flores, Preston Sharkey, Davis Beecher, Miles Cooperman, and graduate assistant Jace McCain, the older brother of Jared. All of those guys were honored before the game as well. Thank them for everything that they do, from Towel Mountain to really just ensuring that this program runs as seamless as possible. They are the heart and soul of Duke basketball. It's not just the players that get it done on the floor, it's all the managers, what they do behind the scenes to make them into position to be the best they can be. So we really appreciate them. Let's get into the headlines. And of course, Scott, you are not on the DBR podcast at gmail.com. So you, like everyone
Not
else,
one of the
out there,
privileges of being ACC six-man podcaster of the year.
I
don't
think,
have the password yet. Call in and tell Jason and Donald how much that angers you all.
Jason
Call in.
said,
This is not radio. Email in.
Jason may or may not have said that you have to win the podcast Six Man of the Year award before you're eligible. It's just how it goes.
Rules
here.
are rules.
Rules are rules. We abide by rules on the show, but we have a few headlines for you. First one from Courtney Kruger, who wrote, "Can't see the forest for the Tyrese," which I think was a clever one. Of course, Tyrese Proctor returns after one game for what possibly could be his final game in Cameron. That goes for a lot of those guys on this team. But he was back in, of course, Wake Forest pun. Teron Chartier had a nice little bit of alliteration. Devils demoralize Demons with their diabolical defense. Again, first time I read that live, so we're going to go with it. Ken Swanner, he wrote, Blue Devils drape flag over Deacons for senior night win. I thought that was good. Jarrett Strauss. This one was a great one. Jarrett Strauss wrote, "Don't make them angry. You wouldn't like them when they're angry." Duke goes into Hulk mode, and we'll talk about how pissed off Duke looked on the floor last night when they were extending this lead to a 40-point lead at one point. Chris Emmershine wrote in. He always writes in some great ones, and this one was really good. Duke puts Wake into the Forbes 500 because they're 6-6 away, while Devils join the Fortune 100, as in percent, 17-0 at home. I thought that was really good. And then John Grantland, who obviously always writes in all the time. John Grantland, good luck today down at MD Anderson. John Grantland wrote simply, "One more year, please." I think that was a good one as well. So thank you, everybody, who submitted headlines again after the UNC game on Saturday, DBRpodcast at gmail.com. Scott, I'm going to let you lead with the good. There was obviously a lot to take away from this. Where do you want to start?
I mean, it's the good so far outweighs the bad. We could spend the whole podcast on the good. I think that it's very easy to look at some of the obvious good. It's very easy to look at Cooper Flagg being Cooper Flagg. It's very easy.
We'll talk about him. That guy?
I mean, he obviously bears some mention, but one of the things that I thought collectively as a team was the most encouraging thing of this game was 2-2 under the 16-minute media timeout. This game looks like it's going to be a grinded out game. I think many people, myself included, thought that this was actually going to be a somewhat tough game. Wake is a team that always plays us tough. Wake is a team that needed this win to even stay on the bubble, be remotely in that conversation. After that 2-2 media timeout, you think, okay, that's what this game is going to be. It's going to be a grinded out game. Beating teams convincingly that Duke should beat is something that even the best Duke teams have struggled with. The best Duke teams have had their struggles with, hey, this team is coming in playing Duke. It's their Super Bowl. Even going back to the Jahlil Okafor, Tyus Jones 2015 team that won the national championship, there were a lot of really close games that shouldn't have been close that Duke had to squeak out. There haven't been many, if any, of those this year. The fact that Duke has now won 4 straight games in the ACC by 30 points is astronomically insane. And
this is comical. And it's funny because we get emails from people saying, "I'm tired of winning like this." I'm not. I've said that all year. I will continue to say that. I'm very consistent in the fact that these games have been a lot of fun.
And I believe that they said the stat during the broadcast last night that I think it was the first time in program history that Duke had won 4 in a row by 30 plus, which means Duke hasn't even done that during the cupcake portion of the schedule. There are years where Duke plays 4 straight cupcakes and we don't beat them by 30 plus. It reminds me, and again, I've mentioned here on the podcast, I now live in stores. I work at UConn. Yes, I know rivalry, hatred, et cetera, et cetera. What Duke is doing this year reminds me a little bit of what UConn did last year, where the Big East was not as good of a conference as the Big Ten. It was UConn and Purdue as the clear top two teams the whole year, but UConn was just boat racing people every game because the Big East was weaker. That's what Duke is doing. And because Auburn is also having a stellar season because of all this SEC hype, somehow the fact that Duke is having a historic year in a power conference has somehow gone relatively under the radar as much as a Cooper Flag-led team can go under the radar. Again, last night was a game that, by all accounts, was going to be a close, tough game. 4 minutes into the game, looked like it was going to be a close, grinded out game. Duke still won by 30, should have won by 40, almost put 100 up on the board again. It was the type of game where it's much easier to talk about the collective good than it is to pick out individual players because that's how impressive of a performance it was.
There's so much to talk about in this, and I just want to start with this. You mentioned the fact that they're boat racing teams, and I've talked about in previous episodes that some of these games have been kind of a slow burn, right? You kind of ho hum look, and you're like, oh wait, we're up by 20. Like we were just up by like 4 or 5, and now we're up 20, and it doesn't feel like it was something that was a blitz, right? It wasn't a 12-0 run early that did it. This time around, if you look at the middle 20 minutes, we had two big runs, and like you said, we went 5 minutes without scoring, almost, or it was a 2-2. I'm sorry, at the under 16 timeout. We went 3 minutes without scoring, and if you take that out and you take out the end where we really only scored 3 points, we had a average points per possession of 1.53. If you take out that block right there, so in the middle, we were just absolutely just like, nope, this game is over. And what happened was, early on, Wake Forest was being very physical. Some of these guys, dare I say, were being a little bit chippy or borderline dirty, and it pissed us off. And you could tell that when this run happened, it started with Tyrese Proctor being separated after one of his lay-ins, and as these guys kept getting in little not little spats with each other, you could tell and feel this Duke team. They went on a run of 14-2 in the first half. They had a run early in the second half of 18-3. That absolutely just took the doors off. And every single time it was a showboaty, like, oh, you want to try and piss us off on senior night? You want to try and get in our faces on senior night on our floor in our gym? Absolutely not. You could try to do that in Winston-Salem if you want to, but that doesn't fly here, not with this team. And that's how this team operated a lot last night, which I thought was something we've seen a little bit before, but not to the measures that we saw last night.
Speaking of the physicality element of this, that was obviously a theme throughout the game. That was a theme from our first matchup against Wake. I thought that the way John Shire adjusted in the rematch to expecting that physicality was really nice. From the tip, Cooper Flag was essentially playing the point guard. Cooper Flag was the one who was starting the ball up top, doing what the point guard does, making that first pass to initiate the offense. By having him start the possession out top above the three-point line, it limited some of the bumping and grinding that he was going to take. Now, that first possession in particular, Cooper starts it up top. He sort of makes a nominal, not do much pass, then runs through and basically tries to get post position off of a down screen, I think it was from Kaman. Didn't work out. It was well defended. He didn't get the ball in the post. But that's a whole lot different than running a play where Cooper is bumping and grinding and getting elbowed in the post for 30 straight seconds. And that was a theme throughout the game. The other thing that does is as soon as Cooper is bringing the ball up, as soon as he's initiating the offense, you can't guard him with quite as big of strong of a player. If for whatever reason Wake wanted to switch Efton Reed onto Cooper when he was in the post to put some extra height on him, you can't do that, or it becomes much, much harder if Cooper's starting the possession out top playing as a guard. Again, that wasn't something that, there wasn't a single play where you say, oh, that play happens because Cooper's initiating up top. Obviously, he had some pretty incredible pull-up threes that only work because he's out there. But that was a really nice, subtle adjustment from John Shire from game one to game two. And that's something I think Duke fans have noticed, the first 2 years of John Shire's tenure, we haven't quite always done as well in the rematches. And as we have in the first games, teams that we have beaten have played us better in the second matchup. He made some coaching adjustments today, or excuse me, last night. He made some adjustments knowing Cooper Flag is going to get played physical by this Wake Forest team. That to me was really encouraging because that's the book on Duke. The only team to beat Duke in ACC play, Clemson, that's what they did to knock Cooper off his game. Teams in the tournament are going to try to do that. We will get a ref at one point in time during the tournament who is going to let some of that go. Now we know that there are some tools in John Shire's toolbox to mitigate that, to get Cooper some looks, to mitigate the wear and tear on his body in order to deal with those matchups. That was a really encouraging sign.
And it tells the rest of the ACC, if you think getting under our skin is going to get us off our game, it's only going to make us stronger. And this team has been built to kind of withstand that. And like you said, save for the Clemson game where we still were in a position to win that game, save for Cooper slipping on the floor. Like this team is built to withstand that kind of pressure and respond to it. And the way they responded to it is what they learned in those 2 games on neutral site floors against Kansas and Kentucky. They played the same way. And early on, the freshmen were not able to adjust well to it. Cooper Flag and Con Knipple especially. Now they have. And now you see Con Knipple initiating contact. You see Cooper elevating over contact and going through contact. It is fun to watch how well they have adjusted and how well they've grown to all of this thing. So I really like that. I want to mention the defense for a second because I know we'll cover some of it, but the defense holds Wake Forest to 32.8% from the floor, 37.5% from three. They force 15 turnovers. They only allow 60 points, which I actually will talk about in the bad a little bit. But Cameron Hildreth, Jason on the preview said that he had averaged 22 points a game over the last month. Cameron Hildreth last night had 0 points. And I could tell he was frustrated because then he started getting, again, borderline dirty with some of his tactics on defense. But I think the idea of Wake Forest, I said if Wake Forest can be held at 60 or under, they're going to lose this game. And I mean, with 11 minutes left, they had 41 points, and it did feel like they were going to blow the doors off and get back into this ball game. I really liked how our defense, again, stepped up and played pissed off, but within reason, right? They weren't fouling. They were getting a lot of turnovers. They were getting a lot of shot clock violations to the point where, like, I think Hunter Salas had one where he was 35 feet from the basket trying to dribble around, and the shot clock expired. And again, once he looked up, he was like, "Oh, we're done. Like we gotta go the other way." Those are the type of wins that Duke is looking for on defense, and they got a bunch of them.
Hunter Salas and Efton Reed had to make hard shots to score. That was the thing that stuck out to me. Yes, they scored. Efton Reed got a couple of threes that, we sort of gave him because he's a big guy. But, the 2 sort of pillars down low and up top of Wake Forest offense had to struggle to score. And good teams are going to make shots, but everything they had to make was contested over a man, challenging shots. That is the strength of this Duke defense. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, and I think this will sort of segue into my element of the bad as well, but Kaman played great in the switch pick and roll today or tonight. I keep forgetting it's Tuesday. And behind the scenes, this is Tuesday morning when we're recording this, everyone. But one of the things that stuck out to me was he does get beat off the dribble when he switches onto a guard and pick and roll, unsurprisingly. But his length allows it. So if a guard gets a half step by him, that doesn't actually amount to much because of his ability to recover and just stick out his go-go gadget arms and get a hand in the lane. There were a handful of possessions where it was either Salas or it was Trayvon Spillers or Tyler Johnson where there was a switch. They got that half step. You think, okay, this is a bucket. but because of Kaman's ability to recover, because of his ability to still get a hand in the way, even from a half step behind, what could have been a layup ended up having to be a kick out that Duke was able to recover. Kaman is obviously taken some coaching from Malik Brown over the course of this year on how to play the pick and roll and how to switch in the pick and roll. And it's not as beautiful as when Malik does it, when he can literally shut down a guard at his size. But Kaman is learned how to use his unique gifts to slide into that and play that similar role. So when Malik gets back, hopefully when he gets back sooner rather than later, I think there's going to be less of a jarring transition in Duke's defensive styles when Malik is in versus when Kaman is in. I think we're going to see Duke switching 1 through 5, almost all the way out, through the tournament through March, regardless of who that 5-man is. Again, assuming Malik gets back as soon as possible.
I think also I want to talk. We're going to talk about Cooper in a second. But I want to mention the hustle that some guys on this team had. Khan was all over the place once again. Mason Gillis had some second half threes, and just again on defense was everywhere. His tenacity was helping this team push through. Slim was on one, right? Even on defense, Slim was kind of again getting active in passing lanes. He was going for steals. He didn't quite get there, but he was still. I mean, he was disrupting Wake Forest's offense. Big Pat. I know we'll talk about him a little bit in the bad, but man, the hustle that he had on like a sequence of plays in the game on offense. He didn't score, but he found a way to keep plays alive. He was on the ground. He was falling out of bounds. Again, he's learning from Khan. These guys are all helping each other, and I loved that part of it. And that's what fueled a lot of these plays. So I just want to shout that out. I know we're talking about some of the superlatives on offense that we have and some of the players that we do, but those dirty plays win championships. And that's what we need.
And the team plays that way, whether it's a 2-point game or whether it's a 20-point game, which is just fascinating. Whatever John Shire has instilled in these guys so that they're diving for loose balls with 5 minutes to go in the second half, up 30, the same way they are at the opening possession. Bottle that and sell that, and you're a billionaire. That is, again, I talked at the beginning about some of the things that this Duke team does that differentiates it from some of the great Duke teams of this one and done era. That's one of those things too, where that this team is from 1 through 10 is putting effort in every play, is getting on the floor in every play. I texted you guys at one point a couple games ago that Khan has a full extension loose ball dive on the floor that looks like Grayson Allen in the national championship game, but he has one of those every game. It feels like every game he's full extending diving for a loose ball, and again, that might come where it's a 2-point game or whether it's a 20-point game. Those are the things that are going to pay dividends now that we get into the one and done, lose and you go home portion of the season.
It's funny. I feel like Wake Forest had to game plan for just exactly that, because a few times that Khan had some ridiculous save out of bounds and it went straight to a Wake Forest player who was in the right position to catch it, or at least tip it up in the air and grab it. And it felt like they were kind of ready for Khan to be all over the place. They weren't ready for Big Pat and Mason Gillis and Isaiah Evans to be and Sion James to be all over the place as well, doing those loose ball things. There was an emotional game last night. You could feel that in how they were diving all over the place. Let's get to some of the individual players. Let's go to Cooper Flagg. We've waited long enough. 28 points.
This might be a record for the longest, a podcast has taken before going into Cooper Flagg.
We did mention his name, and we just kept teasing. The tease is over. Cooper Flagg, 28 points, 10 for 16 from the floor, 3 for 6 from 3, 5 for 6 from the line, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 blocks, and 2 steals. A 25-5 game. And when I say that more than one outlet showcased his stat line and some of his plays with the question, is this the National Player of the Year? that was a National Player of the Year performance last night.
A couple things stand out. One, you think the Cooper flag has an impact on the game. The numbers bear that out. Even in a blowout, he had the best plus minus of the team. He was plus 34. He also played 34 minutes last night, which I thought was pretty darn interesting given the lack of competitiveness, especially in the last 10 minutes of this game. I believe he played almost the entire first half. I'm trying to stall as I scroll down. So he played 1850 of the first half. He was only out for a minute of that first half action.
They did like a JJ type of sub, right? Where he came out maybe a minute or so before
Yeah,
a
right
TV
around
timeout.
the media timeout.
Yep.
It almost felt like okay, Cooper, let's start ramping you up for March because those cramping issues better not come up when we're playing for the Final Four. And he obviously took that and he played, like we're talking about, at 100% from the jump through the end. What I've loved about watching Cooper's evolution this year is that you see him getting better from his college experience. You see him making shots through contact that he wasn't making early in the season, that he wasn't making against Kentucky and Kansas. You see him hanging on to the ball when he's getting double and triple teamed and making this good pass in positions where that was going to be a turnover early in the year against the Kentuckys, against the Kansases. As good as he has been, he's gotten demonstrably better from the start of the season to now, which is
scary. It's scary.
Like, for a kid who is just now 18 years old. The fact that there are some media outlets who are trying to create some sort of narrative of, oh, is Dylan Harper, making a case, making it close for number one? No, it's ridiculous. That's the most clickbaity of clickbaity things, and potential makes me angry every time I see it. Cooper Flag is showing not only that he's the best player in college basketball, but that he's still just scratching the surface. By the way, for a guy who the knock on him was his shooting, and the knock on him was his shooting for the first third of this season, he shot 50% from three again in this game. He made contested threes. He made threes where he was creating his own shot off the dribble. The question on him, even amongst us entering the year, was can he create his own offense? He's answered that question. The answer is yes. He can create his own shot off the dribble. He can create shots when he's seemingly covered and do a Dirk Nowitzki impersonation. He can go through contact off the dribble and make tough layups amongst the trees. And these are, again, all things that he wasn't doing at the beginning of the year. He has improved from day one to senior day, which is just remarkable for a man of his talents.
It's a joy to watch him play. It's a joy, as you mentioned, to see how, like, again, the machine learns from every moment of every single second he's in the game and files that away for later use and brings it out and deploys this new and improved Cooper Flag every single game. I'm going to single out him and Man Man because Man Man had 4 points, 14 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. First of all, Cooper Flag, there was a couple of blocks where he blocked and he was disinterested with the offensive portion of that sequence. He was just flexing for everybody and just yelling. He had, like, the two of them had a ton of fun out there. Khan included as well, right? But when I don't think they pulled Khan at the same time as Flag and Man Man.
He was already out at the 4 minute.
He was already out. That's right. And again, Khan 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, just 1 assist shy of a 10-5-5 with 2 steals. But when they pulled Flag and Man Man, I haven't seen. I mean, Coach K, there's the beloved hug, right? For a guy coming off of what would be his final game. That's usually reserved for seniors. I have not necessarily seen that for all of the freshmen that we've had that are one and done. But there was a definite moment between Shire and Flag, and then also Shire and Man Man. Just an acknowledgement of, if this was it, man, you guys gave me the best that you could be, and I know you can only get better from here. I think that's what this team is all about, is every single player. We talked about at the beginning of the season, we took a couple licks, but we got better in every single game, despite the fact that the rest of the nation is so fixated on Auburn. as I mentioned a few years ago, like don't talk about this team like we didn't play Auburn and beat them. Like this and that team was loads worse than this team is now that we saw last night. So I can only you can only extrapolate and say, man, I'm glad March is here. We cannot wait for the postseason. Of course, we got a little ways to go before that, but to end their turn time in Cameron with that performance was nothing short of incredible and is memorable. It's something that anyone who watched that game is going to be like, man, if that's the last thing that we see of Cooper Flag, damn, that was good.
I think I'm glad you brought him up. I mentioned his good in terms of the defense. The rebounding was necessary. There were moments where Duke struggled on the glass. I think that was something that was a issue that sort of got glossed over because it didn't really come back to bite us. But man having 14 rebounds really sort of was very necessary on a night where Duke did not have a dominant rebounding performance. And that is something that he hasn't always done for a guy of his size and stature. His rebounding numbers haven't always been as extraordinary as you would expect. I would argue that Malik is a better pure rebounder than Man is at this stage based off of the way he positions himself, knows how to use his body, etc. So for him to have 14 rebounds in a matchup that isn't of the best for him. Efton Reed is a sort of big, bruising big, the type of big that has given Man some trouble. The fact that he puts up 14 boards, the fact that he holds Efton Reed in check. Again, his Efton Reed stat line looks a little bit better because he made those 2 threes, neither of which were man's fault. Those were given to him because he's a 3-point shooter. That was another positive sign. And Man also played big minutes. The final tally is only 24 because because of garbage time at the end of the game. But he was playing in longer spurts today. I think that is another one of those, okay, let's start getting Man ready for March types of decisions from John Shire. I also think that Tyrese Proctor playing yesterday was another one of those let's get ready for March types of decisions because we don't want to maybe he could have benefited from another day. He obviously wasn't 100%, but you don't want to let that rust build up when there isn't much time to break it down. I thought those 3 decisions from Coach Shire, the way he utilized those 3 guys, were very clearly with an eye to March. And I think all 3 of them in their own way responded very positively.
In the case of Tyrese Proctor, of course, we mentioned he was out with a bone bruise on Saturday. He comes back. I had heard some rumblings that because it could possibly be his final game as well, along with 90% of the team, that he
in this era, it could be everyone's final game. Let's just say it.
Right.
We never know.
But if this was I think the idea was if this game was the UNC game on Saturday, he would have been held out last night. But because it was the final game in Cameron, the word was that there were rumblings that he was going to give it a go. Man, give it a go. He did. He started. He played heavy minutes. It took him a while. You could tell that these guys don't like being off for a little more than a couple days because he was injured halfway through that Miami game or halfway through the first half of that Miami game, sat out on Saturday. There was a little bit of rust. It took him a while to get into this game, but again, towards the end of his time on the floor, you were able to see, hey, this Tyrese Proctor guy is back. He's doing really well. And I think, again, it shows the committee that his bone bruise wasn't serious, that it wasn't something that's going to be laboring, that he's a guy who can tough through it. And this team just will find a way to rally around that. So I'm really appreciative of his effort. Last thing I wanted to mention in the good, Neil Begovic. What's this half Euro step layup that you did with the left hand? It was brilliant. Like, where has this been all our lives? That was again, we love it when those guys get playing time. They all got about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes at the end of the bench, getting into the game, and all of them contributed, right? Like Cameron Sheffield got a rebound, Harris got a rebound, Begovic had the two sweet points on the layup that everybody was kind of mimicking for the rest of the game.
Stanley was trying real hard to get his first basket.
He took his first shot. He just missed, but he got a block out there, and Spencer Hubbard got a steal. So every one of them were able to give us something on their final nights in Cameron. I mean, Harris obviously has got a long way to go, but Sheffield, Begovic, Borden, Hubbard all came in, all contributed at the end. And I again, the fact that we were able to see so much of those guys this year is a testament to how this team is like we're gonna dust people so that everybody can eat and everyone is at the table and we're all sharing this plate. So I really loved how this team was able to, put this team away early to the point where John Shire can make these decisions and bring on some of those guys off the bench.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up because I haven't been on the pod in a few weeks. I hope that Neil Begovic follows the Justin Robinson path and ends up back on the Duke bench in some role in the future. The episode of Duke Blue Planet from a few weeks ago, where he's mic'd up at practice and during the games, was incredible. The amount that he is engaged essentially as a coach on the bench, the amount of advice that he was giving to man as, during the game, during practice. It's clear that Neil Begovic knows his stuff. It's clear he's a bright dude, shocking considering he's going to have degrees from both Stanford and Duke. The inverse Jalen Blakes, if you will. I'm not sure what's in his future, but if he wants to, pursue basketball coaching, I really hope that John Shire gives him a look at a role on this team because it certainly looks like he's one of those guys who has a real impact on this team from the bench during practice, despite the fact that he's not on the floor. So kudos to him. Kudos to all the other seniors. Like you said, this year more than any, we've seen their effects. And we've seen how hyped the bench gets when those guys get in the games and when those guys perform. And if that doesn't tell you how connected this team is, I don't know what will.
I couldn't say it better than that. So I'm going to leave it there in the good. Let's take a quick break here. We'll be back. We'll talk about some of the things we need to improve. And of course, we're going to talk about the play of the game and the Duke women in the ACC tournament. We're going to tell you what their seed is after this.
Hey guys, want better performance in all areas of your life? If the answer to the above question is yes, try Joy Mode Daily to support healthier blood flow, improved heart health, and enhance your athletic performance. It is proven to improve performance by 50% in just 60 days, and it is expertly formulated and backed up by science.
Yeah, all you do is simply mix a booster pack with water, and you will feel the effects within 45 minutes. Take control with Joy Mode. Get a boost anytime, anywhere, and never miss a beat. Save up to 30% when you start a subscription today and keep your performance at its best without any interruptions.
So, if you're looking to take your game to the next level, visit tryjoymode.com. And here's the code. Use the code DukeBB at checkout for 20% off a single purchase or 30% off a subscription order. That's TRYJOYMODE. Tryjoymode.com. And the code again, DukeBB, for 20% off single purchases and 30% off subscription orders.
All right, we are back. I'm here with Scott Rich. Of course, Jason is out right now, but we are going to discuss some of the things we need to improve in this game. And I just want to start with the simple one, and we can get into the weeds on a couple of things. But I think the simple one is this. We had the slow start to the game. We didn't score for the first 3.5 minutes and included some quick threes. And I think the first part is John Shire after the game mentioned that it was his fault, that he wanted the team to play faster, that he saw the old weight game and saw how slow we were playing and said he wanted the pace to pick up. And he knew that may cost us some efficiency. And I think he said early we didn't take good shots, but overall this team fights for great shots. And I thought it was very hard to come by in the first few minutes of the game. We talked about the physicality that Wake Forest presented, and that's partially what they wanted to do. But I think also maybe the idea of intentionally trying to speed up may have caused some of the inefficiency we saw in the first few minutes and led to what was not necessarily erratic, but it was definitely a slow burn to get started.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point for me is sort of intertwined with the Isaiah Evans question of sometimes our three-point shot selection is questionable. Isaiah Evans in particular. That said, I can't get too mad about that because it's very clear that the staff isn't getting too mad about that. Isaiah Evans has become one of the, the no, yes type of player because he takes shots that, why the heck are you shooting that? Oh, okay, I guess you can make it. You bet you keep shooting it. And it seems like every game he does that, and then he throws up the one brick that's like, what the heck were you thinking? And the old coach in me is thinking, oh my God, how do you do that? That's going to stop momentum. But then you look on the sideline, you look at the rest of the team, and no one seems perturbed by it. So that is very obviously something that the coaching staff is instilling in Isaiah. I think that's related to what you were saying, because that was obviously something that the coaching staff wanted this team to do in the first 4 minutes, to get up and running up the court, to take some of those transition threes, to potentially mitigate Wake's ability to get physical, to set up their defense. So if that's the strategy, if that's the game plan, that's fine with me. That's obviously John Cherry knows way more than we do about basketball, has looked at way more tape than we ever have in these games. But I think that's something that we do need to assess when and how we implement that. We do need to assess when and how quickly we pull the reins back if it isn't working. I think the one thing that could have been fixed during those first 4 minutes was, okay, we put up a couple of shots. They haven't worked. Let's pull the reins back and let's set up some offense. I hate agreeing with Corey Alexander because he drives me crazy, but he was right in those first few minutes of the game where he just said, okay, those threes aren't going in. It's time to attack the rim. Having that, reacting a couple possessions earlier to making that switch, really, one of the only few nits you have to pick in this game.
It's funny. He mentioned that it was like 2 minutes too late because like 20 seconds after he said, oh, they need to abandon the three, Cooper Flagg hits a three, and we're like, okay, well, we're all wrong here, right? But I will notice that during that stretch, that early stretch, I mean, Man took a three that, I mean, you and I would probably say was ill-advised, but not once did any of those guys turn towards the bench after one of their shots as if to say, like, ooh, he might not like that. And the only time you saw John Shire, when they zoomed in on him, he kept telling them faster, go faster. So it was clearly something that he was like, I'm going to abandon efficiency for the first few minutes of the game because I want to try and go fast. Again, as you mentioned earlier, maybe playing towards March and some of the things that we could deploy early in the game that could try and shock a team and get them out of their heels early. I know you have one thing you want to talk about. I have two big things I want to talk about. Actually, I have one big thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about a little thing first is I'm mad that they got to 60 points. I'm just mad. They had 41 points with 10 minutes left. They had 51 points with 2 minutes left. It was 91 to 50. I'm sorry, 2:24 left. It was 91 to 51. We were up 40, and somehow they end up with 60 points. This is one of those things where I did not like this particular Wake team this year, and how they played us in both games. I didn't like how some of these players were borderline dirty with their tactics. And I wanted to blitz them. I wanted to run them out of the gym. I wanted to have another 100-point game. I guess we saved those for Saturday, so hi UNC, look out. But I'm joking here when I say 60 points was the marker that I wanted, and it was an and one with like 15 seconds left that got them over, got them to 60 points. But tremendous defensive effort. I just wish it was reflected in the fact that we could go, hey, they kept this team in the 40s or the 50s.
So the one thing that stood out to me, and again, it is hard to find the bad in a game like today. I love Patrick Gongba. I love the effort with which he plays. I love his offensive skill set. He makes some plays offensively that man Malik don't make, but he's still got a ways to go defensively. When he came in for the first time after the under 16-minute timeout, when the game was still 2-2, Pat and Isaiah came in after that timeout. I charted 5 straight possessions in which Wake attacked him in the pick and roll, and particularly 5 straight possessions in which they baited him into switching out onto a guard, and then they attacked that. And as much as we love Patrick Gongba, he does not have the physical gifts of Kaman Malawach. And when he gets beat off the dribble, he can't quite recover the way Kaman does. And not only that, those possessions were followed up by a couple where Wake was very clearly trying to get Efton Reed one-on-one in the post on Pat. I think Pat's post defense is much, much better than his pick and roll defense. I think it was sort of interesting that Wake, got away from that. But there's very clearly a asterisk on the scouting report of when Pat enters the game, that is a point that you can attack the Duke defense. Earlier in the year, when Pat was in, he was playing drop coverage and pick and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And that was masking some of the challenges he was having. I think that he's better suited to being a drop pick and roll defender. There's nothing right or wrong about that. You know, how you play that is based off of who you are and what your defensive strengths are and are not. It surprised me in this game that the strategy seemed to be just let's try to stick a square peg in a round hole and have Pat play the same defensively as Kamon. If Malik Brown is out for longer than we hope he is, that's going to be the weakness entering March. And there's going to be a big question of, can Kamon stay out of foul trouble? Can he play closer to 30 minutes than 20 minutes? Because as much as we love Pat, as much as he does give us a lot of positives in hustle, as long as he gives us a lot of positives on the offensive side of the ball, today he was a minus defensively. And it's obviously something that will be interesting to see whether there are adjustments made in how he plays defensively if Malik is indeed out against UNC. If he's playing switch defense against UNC, that's going to be a real matchup problem. So it'll be very interesting to see how he adjusts from this and learns from this, and also how the coaching staff adjusts. Because that was, again, in an overwhelmingly positive game. The one thing that stuck out was how clearly Wake was keying in on Pat and trying to attack him in the pick and rolls. And again, this is nitpicking. This is a freshman big. Freshman bigs always struggle in that pick and roll. That's something that comes with experience. We are spoiled with Malik Brown. We are spoiled with how Kamon has improved in that element of his game. But that might be something that happens in March. Again, depending on Malik Brown's status, it doesn't seem like we have any clarity on that when and if he's going to return. That's something to keep an eye on if Malik is out for any longer period.
I think I'm not as concerned about it. And yes, you're right that it was something that Wake Forest liked to key on. It didn't affect the end, right? Because, you know, again, we don't look at plus minus all the time, but I noticed that he had a plus 22 in 14 minutes. So, like, there was clearly something that the team, was, at least the coaching staff, was like, hey, we're willing to let him learn on the job when it comes to this. And again, maybe it's not something that he's well suited at, but it's something that he's going to have to learn how to deal with come March time when he's in the game, right? And that way there's no real drop off in our defensive shape. But I agree, it's definitely something to improve. I want to get to the biggest elephant in the room. Again, we're done with the kind of nitpicky stuff. Caleb Foster is the only guy other than Malik Brown who does not play in this game. It's the first DNP of the season for Caleb Foster. We were talking about this online. I'm sure everyone out there was talking about it. I know I had several group chats where Caleb Foster's name came up. And first, people were asking whether he was injured or sick. There was nothing to indicate that he wasn't ready to go in this game. There was no report from Duke. John Shire did not reference Caleb Foster in the post-game presser. I don't think there was any questions asked about him not playing, because I think at that point, a few people still hadn't realized that not everybody got into this game. I think the weirdest part is that this happened 48 hours after he played 15 minutes against Florida State. And then this time last week, he played 17 minutes against Miami. And his numbers had been ticking up during the year. And yes, a lot of Saturday's minutes were in garbage time in the second half. He played 11 minutes in the second half, of which we were cruising by then. But the idea was him getting confidence before March. And I'm very, very shocked that he did not play. I wonder if it was an oversight, right? I'm kind of grasping at straws to kind of explain the unexplainable. But for him to have 0 minutes was the biggest glaring thing I saw. That was like this could be something.
Here are Caleb Foster's minutes played in the last 9 games. So this is at all the games since UNC. 15 against Syracuse, 3 in the loss to Clemson, 10 against Cal, 6, 7, 7 against Stanford, UVA, Illinois, 17 against Miami, 15 against FSU, DNP.
0. Yeah.
There's If you can find the signal in that noise, then let us know. I have been similarly perplexed, and you and Jason and I have been texting a little bit about what the heck's going on
Mhm.
with Caleb. It's a weird situation, and again, it's especially weird because this team is better if Caleb Foster plays well. Even
Right.
if Caleb Foster's role on this team is 5 minutes playing the backup point, for a small spurt in the first half. If Caleb Foster can play that role and play it well, this team is better. Again, it's not better that it's going to, prevent us from reaching our lofty goals in March, but it is still an extra weapon that makes this team better. And it certainly seemed like, particularly over the last 3 or 4 games, that that's what things were trending towards, that the Duke staff was trying to get him minutes, right? And that you guys mentioned on the pod, I forget which game it was. I think it was against Illinois, where it sort of seemed like he went in at the end and it was like, Caleb, you shoot, you get yourself out of the shooting slump. And it
Correct.
seemed like he was. He was he's 4 for his last 5 from three over the last 3 games. He's sort of starting to look like Caleb Foster again. So for him to not play I agree, it's just weird. And again, I don't say this as someone expecting Caleb to play big minutes in March. I think that ship has sailed. I think that ship has sailed for a long time. But having him in the back pocket, particularly if Tyrese isn't 100% for longer than we anticipate, makes this team better. This was another opportunity in a 30-point game to get him some run, to help get him out of whatever slump he's been in. So for him not to play was weird. I'll say this one thing. There were videos posted online of the senior speeches, as they always tend to be. They were very abbreviated this year because, Sion and Mason have only been here for a year. They're men of relatively few words. It was striking Caleb's body language. When the video panned to him, he was sort of standing by himself. He sort of wasn't engaged and happy and with the rest of his teammates in senior night. I have no idea why. It could be because it was this oversight and he was understandably frustrated that he didn't get in. But something's going on, man. There's something that has to explain this deviation. I have no idea what it is. I don't think anyone knows what it is. But I love Caleb Foster. I love what he's done in a Duke uniform, even if that hasn't always translated into raw numbers. I love how much he loves being at Duke. And I hope whatever is going on gets resolved, because there could be a game in March where we need to put him in and he needs to be a spark plug for 5 minutes. And I hope that we still have that tool in our toolbox.
I will say, I saw some of the, again, the truncated videos, and they don't always tell, right, the full story. And I agree with
Oh,
you. In those
100%.
videos, it sounded like
I'm 100% Zapruder filming it.
Yeah. But I mean, I will say that there's people who were at the game who were like, yo, he was joking around with his teammates. He was, still when Neil Bekovich was up, he was, mimicking his layup that he got in the game with the half euro step and hamming it up. And I think what a lot of people said was that were at the game was like, yeah, he looked like he was fine. The only striking thing was he was the only one that was still in his warm-up shirt because he's the only one that didn't play. And again, people have taken it to mean so many different things, from he's sick or injured
I was
to
choosing my words very carefully
yeah,
to
I would
not
just say
imply
like
anything.
yeah, I mean, people are speculating anything from he was sick or hurt, which again, there was no official word, to he's already decided to transfer, which again, also by what I've heard, is not necessarily the case. They all are just kind of living in this moment, and again, would not explain why 48 hours ago he was counted on for 15 minutes, and then last night he was counted for zero. All of it is weird. Maybe we'll get some more word as to how that transpired later on. But for now, all I can say is this: what I've said a lot all season. There's a lot of reasons why we can win in March, and one of them is Caleb Foster's confidence is there. I would love to keep his confidence trending upward to the point where again, you never know who you might need until you need them in March. We didn't know we were going to need Grayson Allen in 2015 until we did. We didn't know that we were going to need Patrick Ngong, but this year until we did. And we didn't, and how much better is this team now that he got that experience in January when Malik was out? It wasn't an unknown when Malik Brown got hurt. And of course, we want him back ASAP. But in the interim, if he can't go, we still have the confidence that Pat Gongba and Man can go out there and do their thing. And then, so I think those things, everyone on this team has this ability to be the spark plug that helps this team. And it does not have to be putting up Cooper Flag numbers. Just like you said, it can be the hustle points. It could be the rebounding. It could be the defense. Mason Gillis does not need to go for 20 points for him to have an impact in this game. We have learned that throughout this year. These are the things that we need to use, but part of that is getting Caleb Foster to a confidence level that when he checks into the game, he knows that he can do what he did last year and that there will be no drop off in our defense and in our offense. So I'm really hoping that that it was just an oversight. But again, we can't just speculate beyond that because we just don't know. It's just too weird. So let's leave that part here. Let's go to the play of the game. There were a couple, Scott. I'm going to go with this one. I think it was in the second half. Cooper got an and one, flex for the cameras. It was great. He misses the free throw. Big Pat hustles for the rebound. He kind of tips it around. He grabs it. Quick pass out to Gillis for the three. Gillis misses it. Wake grabs the rebound, but then Big Pat somehow finds his way behind the guy. He immediately strips the ball, hits the deck, grabs the ball, and throws it out to Tyrese Proctor. They kind of run the offense for about 10 more seconds, and then the offense ends with another flag two-pointer. I love the hustle on that sequence because, again, that may be, I don't even know if that was attributed to being two possessions, right? I don't know if Big Pat got a steal in that equation because it was so quick, but I love the fact that his hustle all over the place led to finally that being a 4-point trip as opposed to 2.
Then the great thing is there were probably 3 or 4 plays of that ilk that you could have chosen that were multiple guys on the floor, multiple
I had one in the first
offensive
half
rebounds.
Too.
Yeah,
I won the first half. So.
And that was just, again, in a game that was a 20-point game, it was just incredible. I have 2 plays of the game, slightly more subtle. And they were plays that I think speak to the improvement of our team over the course of the year. One was, again, I don't think it wasn't a highlight reel play, but it was Slim taking the ball coast to coast, taking it to the rim, through the trees for a layup. 6 months ago, basketball seasons aren't that 6 months. 3 months ago, it's been a long February, everyone. 3 months ago, I don't think anyone would have seen Isaiah Evans attacking the rim. He was a one-trick pony, and that was a really, really good trick, but he was a 3-point shooter. The fact that he is now, for multiple games now, shown that he can attack the rim, and it was a nice finish too. He sort of gave it a baby hook to get it over a bigger defender. That's something that shows Isaiah Evans has more to his game and something that you have to defend him a little bit more honestly. But my real play of the game was under 8 minutes to go. Cooper has the ball on the top of the key, dribbles into the paint, gets triple teamed. And that was a possession where in November, that's a turnover. In November against Kansas and Kentucky in those games, that is a turnover. That's a potential, pick 6 down the other way. Cooper pivots strong, maintains the ball. I think he might have sort of fumbled it briefly at one point, but keeps his hands on the ball. Sees Sion wide open because Cooper's triple team, someone's open, drops it off for an easy layup. Again, that's a play that Cooper Flag doesn't make 4 months ago. He's stronger now. He's better at dealing with that physicality. He's better at keeping his head up when that physicality comes, when he has to make those moves. And that's 2 points on the board that Duke doesn't get 4 months ago. Those weren't the highlight reels for either Slim or Cooper, but to me, those were the plays that show these guys have gotten a lot better. And again, these are guys who've gotten a lot better since we played Auburn and beat them back in November.
The bobble that Cooper had on that play is what led to the pass in a way, right? It was kind of like that pass he had to Ngongba like a month ago, where Ngongba kind of like caught it in one air and just kind of laid it in. It was kind of the seal.
All in one, that's the
motion.
Play but I'm glad you brought that up. Because I said a lot of negative things about Pat. That play I love. When he made that play
The
where
touch he has around the rim.
he has it, he brought it up in one motion, like a fumbling pass on his hip, right up one motion layup. No other big on this team does that. Big Pat has big future in a Duke uniform, even though I just picked on him for 10 minutes. I'm sorry, sir, if you listen to this podcast. Although
it's
that
all
would
in
be very
love.
interesting if you do.
It's all in love. Yeah. If he does, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to have you. Let's leave this game in the past. Of course, we got the UNC game this weekend. We have episode number 700 this weekend. But before we get out of here, I just want to make a note that the ACC women's basketball tournament begins this week in Greensboro. And of course, shout out to our Duke women, the sisterhood. They are the 3 seed in the ACC tournament, which is no slouch in what we have said is the best conference possibly in all of basketball. The women's ACC has been tremendous this year. There are several teams that are in the top 16 of the country. They are second. They're third overall. NC State and Notre Dame tie for first in the ACC. Duke will be the 3 seed. They await like a Louisville, maybe even a Stanford, if Stanford's able to kind of channel what got them into the conference essentially and make their way. But they earn a double bye to the quarterfinals on Friday. All the games are going to be in the ESPN Family Network, so check your local listings. But best of luck to the sisterhood in the ACC tournament. We will be watching, and we will be hoping that you come out with the title.
Keep an eye on the women's tournament this year for more chaos than I think we've come to expect from the women's game. There have been more upsets of the top tier teams this year in the women's game than I think any in recent memory. UConn lost to Tennessee, but then went out and annihilated South Carolina at South Carolina. Notre Dame just recently lost a game to Florida State, one of these, again, another fringe top 25 team. There isn't this huge gulf between the top 4 or 5 teams in women's college basketball and the rest of women's college basketball as there has been over the past few years. That means a team like a Duke, if Duke gets hot, if Toby Fournier gets hot, you don't know where this team can go. And that's something that the difference between the men's and the women's game over the past 10, 20 years is that top tier of teams is untouchable except by themselves. That's not the case this year. So this is going to be, I think, a really, really interesting, championship tournament week, conference tournament week for the women. It's going to be a really, really fun and interesting March Madness for the women as well.
Yeah, anybody can be beat. There's a lot of great players, right? Juju Watkins is probably a shoe-in for National Player of the Year, but USC can be beat. UCLA can be beat. As you mentioned, Notre Dame, NC State, all of these teams are beatable. And even if you think about South Carolina, there's no team, as you mentioned, that is simply untouchable. All of them have their flaws as a team, whether it's individual performances not coming to bear or just defense. But the great thing is, for the first time in a few years, and again, Kara Lawson has been working to build this squad up, has had a lot of injuries over the last few years. Knock on wood, this team is healthy. This team is prepared. They have played a ridiculous schedule, and they've beaten a lot of these top teams that you just mentioned. So they are hung in there with some of them. So as you say, don't let them get hot, because if they get hot, we're going to be, glued to the TV screen for all of March, which is what we want in the first place. So best of luck to the women this weekend in Greensboro. That will do it for episode number 699 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We thank you as always for listening. Scott, Rich, best man.
Send in your ballots. Send in your ballots for ACC 6-Man Podcaster of the Year. I have a spot on my wall for the plaque. I better get it, and you guys better be voting for me. I don't think such an award exists. However, find it and vote for it and write my name in.
Write him in. If the writers out there who listen to this for actual 6-Man of the Year. If you're not going to vote for Slim or Malik Brown, just write in Scott Rich. I'm sure I'd love to see his name on one of those votes. That would be great. But that will do it for this episode. We will be back very, very soon. Again, check your feeds in the next couple of days. Episode 700 is coming. Kenny Denard is confirmed for this show, and we cannot wait to bring that to you. So until then, he's Scott. I'm Donald. For Jason, this is the Duke Band. They will play us out. They're taking us to 700.